While moving the heavy rug in the businessman's mansion, the cleaner Rachel noticed a raised floorboard. Underneath it was a child's drawing with the words, "Dad, find me." This discovery would change 3 lives forever. The frosty winter morning greeted Rachel with a biting wind. Wearing her worn-out coat, she hurried to work through the snow-covered streets of the elite neighborhood. The 3-story mansion where she would spend the entire day cleaning stood tall among other expensive houses, like an impregnable fortress, just as cold and foreign. "It's okay, the last semester. Just a little more, and I'll get my diploma," the pedagogy student encouraged herself. Rachel had grown up in an orphanage, never knowing her parents. Only vague memories of a lullaby her mother used to sing occasionally surfaced in her mind. The scholarship, the room in the dormitory, and the job as a cleaner in the businessman's house, which she had found through an acquaintance from the cleaning company, allowed her not only to feed herself but also to save a little money for the future. Rachel unlocked the door with her key and entered the hallway. The house was quiet and, as always, perfectly clean. The scent of the owner's expensive perfume had long since dissipated. John Nicholson was rarely here. He preferred to spend time on business trips or at meetings and restaurants. But he insisted that his home always be spotless, just in case he had to bring important guests or business partners over. The young woman turned on the light in the large living room and sighed. Ahead was a major cleaning task. The owner had called yesterday and warned her that he would be away for a week, and the house should be like new when he returned. She took off her coat, changed into her work clothes, and put on thin rubber gloves. Although she knew they wouldn't protect her from the household chemicals, her hands had long been covered in tiny cracks. Soft music played in her headphones, helping her focus on the monotonous work. Rachel worked methodically, first dusting the top shelves, then the windows, mirrors, furniture, and finally, the floors. There were true antiques here: figurines, crockery, a carved coffee table, a velvet-upholstered armchair. She carefully wiped each item, trying not to damage the expensive things. "I wonder what it's like to live among such wealth," she thought, wiping a huge window through which an impeccably maintained garden could be seen. Even in winter, it looked majestic, with lightly dusted bushes. She had never seen John stroll through it. In fact, as far as she could tell, the house resembled more of a museum or a set for some movie, strict and impersonal, no children's photos, no family heirlooms, only valuable paintings and designer furniture. By midday, Rachel had reached the Persian rug in the living room. This rug, which occupied almost the entire central part of the room, was a true work of art. Usually, she would just vacuum it, but today she had to move the heavy item to thoroughly wash the floorboards beneath it. Rachel struggled to move the rug. The floorboards gleamed, but her keen eye noticed that one of the planks was slightly raised above the rest. Probably due to temperature fluctuations, she thought, deciding to check the damage. She gently pressed on the raised plank, and it easily gave way. Rachel cautiously lifted it. Beneath the floorboard, she discovered a small niche, and inside it lay a piece of paper folded in 4, a very ordinary one. Rachel had never allowed herself to touch the owner's belongings, but curiosity got the better of her. She carefully pulled out the piece of paper. It was a child's drawing, made with colored pencils: a bright yellow sun, a house with a red roof, and 3 little people, one large, labeled Dad, one small, labeled Me, and one medium-sized, with a smudged spot where the name should have been. At the bottom, in uneven child's handwriting, were the words, "Dad, I miss you so much. I hope you find me. Your daughter, Stacy." Rachel froze, reading the words over again. John has a daughter? In the 2 years she'd worked in this house, she'd never seen a single hint of a child, no toys, no children's photos, no room that might belong to a little girl. Carefully folding the drawing, Rachel returned it to its place, carefully closing the hidden compartment with the floorboard. Something told her that this discovery was very important. But she didn't dare cross the line. After finishing the cleaning and returning the rug to its place, she spent a long time thinking about the touching note. Who is Stacy? Why isn't she with her father? And does John know about the note? These questions troubled her all evening and even during her lectures at the university. Rachel absent-mindedly took notes on educational psychology, but in her mind, she kept seeing the child's drawing with the simple little figures. 3 days later, when the young woman came back to work, a surprise awaited her. The lights were on in the house, and muffled sounds could be heard from the office on the second floor. John had returned earlier than expected. Rachel quietly climbed the stairs and stopped at the office door. She didn't like disturbing the owner and usually tried to do her work unnoticed. "May I?" she knocked gently. "Come in," a tired voice called out. John was sitting at the massive desk, surrounded by papers. His appearance looked exhausted, his tie was crooked, the top buttons of his shirt were undone, his hair was tousled, and dark circles were settled under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept for several nights. "Good afternoon, John. I didn't expect to see you today. If I'm interrupting, I can come back another time." The man looked up at her with inflamed eyes. No. Go ahead, Rachel. I came back earlier, for personal reasons." She nodded and was about to leave, but the owner unexpectedly stopped her. "Wait. I wanted to ask." He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. During the cleaning, did you find anything unusual here? Perhaps some papers, old things?" Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The note. He's looking for the note from his daughter. But why is he asking about it now? Something specific, the young woman cautiously asked, not daring to admit what she had found just yet. John Nicholson ran a hand over his face, as if wiping away his fatigue. His usually confident gaze now reflected helplessness. "No. He waved his hand. "Never mind. Continue your work." Rachel left the office, but the thoughts of the note wouldn't leave her mind. She mechanically carried on with her work, wondering if she should tell him about her discovery. On one hand, it was personal. On the other, the owner was clearly searching for something, and it seemed to be causing him pain. After working for 2 more hours and finishing the cleaning on the first floor, Rachel made up her mind. She went back upstairs to the office and knocked again. "John, may I bother you for a moment?" The man looked up from his papers. "Yes, Rachel?" "I need to tell you something," the young woman said quietly. "During the deep cleaning, I found something under the floorboards in the living room. A note." The businessman straightened up abruptly. A look of anxiety mixed with hope flashed in his eyes. "Show me," he rasped, standing up from the table. Rachel headed toward the living room, with John Nicholson following her. She carefully moved the rug, knelt down, lifted the floorboard, and with delicate fingers retrieved the folded paper, handing it to the homeowner. John's hands trembled noticeably as he unfolded the paper. He struggled to sit down on the sofa, not taking his eyes off the child's message. "Stacy," he whispered, his fingers tracing the uneven letters. "My little Stacy." Rachel stood there, unsure of what to do. It was the first time she had seen this strong man so vulnerable. It seemed that all his armor of a successful businessman had crumbled to dust with just a glance at the child's drawing. "I'm sorry if I shouldn't have touched it," the young woman said quietly. "I didn't mean to invade your space." Tears were visible under John's eyes. "No, you did the right thing, Rachel." This note. I've been looking for it for years, and I couldn't find it." He paused, once again staring at the drawing as though he couldn't get enough of it. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a daughter," Rachel said gently, sitting on the edge of an armchair across from him. "Yes," he replied quietly. "But I haven't seen her for 7 years. My ex-wife, she had someone talk her into it. She took Stacy and hid her. So well, even the detectives couldn't find them." A heavy silence hung in the living room. John sat, bent over the child's drawing. His broad shoulders slumped. Rachel had never seen him like this, without his usual mask of confidence and businesslike demeanor. Now, in front of her, was simply a father who had lost something incredibly precious. "Can I make you some tea?" she asked softly, feeling uncomfortable for being a witness to such a personal moment. John absent-mindedly nodded. Rachel went to the kitchen, which she knew by heart. Turning on the kettle, she took cups from a china set that seemed to have never been used. The stone countertops were spotless, with not a single smudge. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine. When she returned, the homeowner was still sitting in the same position, gently holding the drawing in his hands as though it might crumble with the slightest careless touch. "You have no idea what this means," he said, not looking up. "I've dreamed so many times to find even the smallest trace of her." Rachel placed the cup in front of him on the coffee table. "Tell me about your daughter," she asked, surprised at her own boldness. After all, who was she, just a cleaner? But John seemed to have been waiting for this question. His eyes lit up, though the pain still lingered in them. "Stacy. She should be 12 now. The last time I saw her, she was 5. He took a sip of tea. "She was born with eyes exactly like mine. Catherine, my ex-wife, always joked that Stacy was my little copy." He gave a bitter smile. "I was a terrible husband. Always at work, always busy. When Catherine and I met, I was just starting my business. We were poor, but happy. Then everything started spinning: deals, contracts, business trips. I provided for the family, but I was home less and less." John ran a hand through his hair, making it even more disheveled. As a father, he paused for a moment. "At first, I was there. I would pick her up, rock her, sing lullabies. Then I'd go back to work again. As if those promises never existed. I'd come home when she was already asleep and leave before she woke up." He gripped the cup so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Catherine first asked, then demanded attention. We fought more and more. I kept justifying myself. I'm doing all this for you. For the future. Only Stacy was always happy to see me. As if she didn't notice my absence. She'd run to me shouting, 'Daddy,' and jump into my arms. We'd draw together. She had talent, better than her peers." John gently touched the drawing. "Now I realize Catherine was trying to save our marriage. And I was too foolish to see it. One day, I came back from a 2-week business trip and found the apartment empty. She had left a note: 'You chose your work over us. We won't disturb you anymore.' And that was it. No contact. No addresses. Nothing." Rachel listened, holding her breath. The story was sad and painfully familiar. How many families had fallen apart because of the pursuit of money and success? "I hired private detectives. The best of the best," John continued. "They found out that Catherine withdrew all the money from the account, took Stacy's documents from the kindergarten, and disappeared. She might have changed her last name. She might have left the country. No traces. There was only one time He paused for a second. When I got a postcard from Stacy on my birthday. No return address. And then, that was it. It stopped. He looked up at Rachel. You know what's the scariest part? All these years I've been afraid that Stacy would forget me. That Catherine would turn her against me. And that note, his voice quivered. She missed me. She was waiting for me to find her. But I couldn't, John whispered. You searched, Rachel said softly. That's the most important thing. Not enough, he shook his head. I kept working, building this damn business. As if it could fill the emptiness. I bought this huge house, thinking that one day she would come back. That she would live here. I kept all her toys, all the drawings that were left. He fell silent and let out a shaky breath, are in the room upstairs. Locked away. John set the cup on the table and covered his face with his hands. The worst part is, I don't even know. Is she okay? Is she healthy? Is she happy? His voice carried such despair that Rachel's heart clenched. She knew that feeling all too well. Not knowing where your loved ones are. Whether they are okay. Whether they think about you. And when did this note appear? She asked. You don't remember when it could have been placed under the parquet? John lowered his hands and looked at her. 2 years ago, I was renovating the living room. The workers were here, changing the lighting, relaying the parquet. The note could have been there before the renovation, or during it. Could any of the workers have been bribed by Catherine to deliver the letter? I don't know. He stood up and began walking slowly around the living room, as if trying to process everything. I don't know what to think anymore. All this uncertainty is driving me crazy. 7 years. 7 years without a single word. And suddenly, I find out my daughter wrote to me. She called me. And I didn't hear her call. Rachel watched him, the strong, authoritative man, used to controlling everything. And now, a broken, lost father. A wave of sympathy rose in her chest. She too had once waited, hoped. She too had dreamed. I often imagined that my parents were looking for me, she said quietly. I made up whole stories about how they lost me by a terrible accident. But they never stopped looking. Every time adults came to the orphanage, I hoped to see familiar faces among them. I remember one time I dreamed of my mom. She was singing me a lullaby and promised to come back. John stopped and looked at her. It seemed like he had just truly seen Rachel, not as a cleaner, not as part of the decor in his lifeless home, but as a living person. A kindred soul in pain. They never came for you, he said almost with regret. Rachel shook her head. No. They were probably already gone. But that's not the point. I know what it's like to wait. But your daughter, unlike me, knows for sure that her father is out there. That he loves her. She left you this note, like a thread. Like a connection that even fear, even separation, couldn't break. And now, when you've found her message, you can't give up. John walked up to the window. Beyond the glass, there was a snow-covered garden, white and silent. I don't know where to begin. The detectives have hit a dead end. All legal methods of search have been exhausted. Catherine clearly doesn't want me to find them. Rachel thought for a moment. She knew the system from the inside. Orphanages, shelters, bureaucracy, and abandoned files with people's fates. John, she began cautiously. Have you ever thought that something could have happened to your ex-wife? He turned sharply to her. What do you mean? Just a suggestion, Rachel nervously fiddled with the hem of her blouse. What if something happened to Catherine? And Stacy ended up in the system, in an orphanage, or under guardianship? The man's face turned pale. Oh my God. I never even thought about that. But, Rachel continued, the detectives checked the orphanage registers, right? If Catherine changed her last name, then Stacy could have entered the system under a different name. But, he started, confused, the databases were checked. They're not always updated in time. Especially in small towns, she said calmly. Everything works the old-fashioned way. And besides, I know people in orphanages and child welfare services. I can help you. I know the system from the inside and can find things that regular detectives won't. John raised his eyebrows in surprise. Why do you want to help me? Rachel shrugged, choosing her words carefully. Because I know what it's like to be a child waiting to be found. And what it's like to be an adult who can't find the way to their child. She stood up and walked toward him. If Catherine is fine and just hiding, we won't find anything. But if there's even the slightest chance that Stacy is in the system under a different name or in another city, we have to check. For the first time during the whole conversation, hope flickered in John's eyes. You really think you can find something the professionals couldn't? I don't know, Rachel answered honestly. But I know how the system works from the inside. I know where to look for loopholes and who to talk to. And most importantly, I know what it means for a child to be found. He nodded slowly, as if making an important decision. All right. What do you need to start? Photos and any data you have, distinctive features, habits, talents, anything that could help identify her, even if she's under a different name. John walked decisively toward the stairs. Let's go, I'll show you. They went up to the third floor, where John stopped in front of a simple white door. His hand trembled as he took the key out of his pocket. I haven't been in here for years. The room behind the door was a child's bedroom, bright, with pink curtains and wallpaper featuring fairies. A canopy bed, bookshelves filled with children's books, toys, and crafts. Everything was neatly arranged, as if the room's owner had just stepped out and would be back any minute. John walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer, pulling out a pink-covered album. This is the album with all her photos from her years, he said hoarsely. And here, he pointed to a box on the shelf, are all the documents I have left of hers, a copy of her birth certificate, her medical records from the clinic. Rachel carefully picked up the album. On the first page was a photo of a tiny newborn girl in the arms of her happy parents. A young John, with not a single gray hair, and a beautiful woman with long brown hair were gazing at the child with adoration. She has a birthmark behind her right ear, John said, flipping through the album and showing photos of the growing girl. And a small scar on her knee. She fell off her bike when she was 4. Also, she never braided her hair on the right side. Only the left. She said it was her special secret. He smiled at the memories, but the smile quickly faded. Stacy loved to draw. She could sit for hours with her sketchbook. And she really loved animals. We had a cat named Mike, she was never without him. Rachel listened, making mental notes. All these details could prove invaluable in the search. What else? Did she have any special talents or traits? John thought for a moment. She was very social, easily made friends. An amazing memory for poems, she could memorize a long poem on the first try. Catherine said she had perfect pitch. Before they disappeared, we were planning to send Stacy to music school. He sank heavily onto the edge of the bed, stroking the pink bedspread. I always hoped they'd come back. That one day Catherine would come to her senses and bring her home. That's why I kept the room exactly as it was. Rachel sat down next to him. We'll find her, she said firmly. I can't promise it will be quick or easy, but we'll do everything we can. John looked at her gratefully. Why are you helping me, Rachel? I'm just your employer. The girl paused, gathering her thoughts. When I was little, in the orphanage, I used to imagine, there's a dad looking for me, and he can't find me. That he's suffering from the separation, just like I am. It helped me not to feel abandoned, useless. And now I see in front of me exactly the kind of father, one who lost his daughter not by choice and is desperately trying to find her. If I can help even one family reunite, it will mean my life has purpose. A silence hung in the room, broken only by the ticking of a child's clock on the wall. Two people, so different in their social standing but united by the shared pain of loss, sat side by side, looking at photos of a happy little girl who was somewhere waiting for her father to find her. Where do we start? John finally asked. By making a list of all the orphanages and boarding schools within a 500-kilometer radius, Rachel replied. Then we'll methodically check each one. It's a long road, but it's the only one we have. She carefully closed the album with the photos. I'll find your daughter, John. I promise you. The following weeks completely changed the lives of both Rachel and John. The girl continued her studies at the university, but all her free time was devoted to Stacy. She no longer worked as a cleaner in the Nicholson house, now she had a much more important mission. John set aside a small office for their headquarters on the first floor of the mansion. The walls of the room quickly filled with maps, lists of children's institutions, and photos of Stacy at various ages. Rachel wrote up a detailed description of the girl, including all her distinctive features, the birthmark behind her right ear, the scar on her knee, the habit of only braiding her hair on the left side. We need to be extremely careful. If Catherine changed her last name, Stacy might be listed under a different name as well. We need to search based on distinctive features and age, she explained. John nodded, listening carefully to every word. Used to being in charge and giving orders, he now willingly accepted the advice of the young woman, who knew more about how the state guardianship system worked than he did. I've prepared a list of all the orphanages within a 500-kilometer radius, Rachel said, showing him a thick folder. There are over 100. And that's not counting private shelters and boarding schools. How are we going to proceed? John asked, reviewing the list. I'll start with making calls, the girl explained. I have some contacts in several institutions who can help with information. But for a full search, we'll need to visit many of these places in person. He looked out the window at the snowy garden thoughtfully. I can't travel with you all the time. I have the company obligations. He fell silent, then turned to her resolutely. But I can provide you with everything you need, transportation, money for expenses, official inquiries. Anything. Rachel nodded. I just need the opportunity to continue my studies. I'm ready to devote all my remaining time to the search. And so, their search began. From home, she sent out inquiries, met with former caregivers and social workers. She used all the connections she had built over the years living in the system. She was helped by friends who remained working in children's institutions and former caretakers who still held warm feelings for her. John, for his part, provided her with a company car and driver to save time and energy, and used his connections to speed up the acquisition of information from official authorities. In the evenings, they met at his house to discuss the day's progress. Sitting over a cup of tea in the spacious kitchen, they exchanged information and made plans for the next day. Sometimes, they stayed up late. There's no point in crisscrossing the whole city, he would say. And Rachel would agree, indeed, it was more practical that way. Gradually, their relationship changed. The boundary between employer and employee disappeared. They became partners, united by a common goal. John began consulting her not only about the search but also about other matters. Her prudence and fresh perspective helped him make decisions. "I've never met a person with such a clear mind and kind heart at the same time," he once said, looking at her. One evening, as they were going through another batch of documents, he said, "You're an amazing woman, Rachel." She blushed at the unexpected compliment. "I'm just doing what I think is right," she replied, shifting the papers. "And for that, I'm endlessly grateful," John said quietly. "Without you, I would have given up a long time ago." One day, on their way back from a trip to a neighboring city, where they had checked another orphanage, Rachel and John got caught in a heavy snowstorm. The road was blocked, and they were forced to stop at a small roadside motel. Sitting in the modest cafe of the motel, having a hot bowl of soup, John suddenly asked, "Rachel, you've never told me about your family. Do you know anything about your parents?" "Almost nothing," she replied, gathering her thoughts. "The file said I was found at the train station with a note that had my name and date of birth. I was about a year old. There was no other information about my parents." John shook his head. "And you never tried to find them?" "I tried when I was a teenager," Rachel gave a faint smile. "I thought there had been some kind of mistake, that they lost me by accident and were looking for me. I even put an ad in the newspaper when I turned 16, but no one responded." She paused, looking out the window at the falling snow. "Then I realized that what matters isn't who gave birth to you, but who loves you. And I decided that one day I would create my own family where no one would ever feel abandoned." John looked at her with deep respect. "You're an amazingly strong person, Rachel. Many people in your place would have become bitter." "It doesn't solve anything," she replied simply. "It only destroys you from the inside." "I prefer to believe that everything happens for a reason," Rachel continued. "Maybe my time in the orphanage was necessary so I could help other children later. Or so I could meet you and help find Stacy." A new, more personal feeling flashed in John's mind, not just gratitude or respect, but something deeper. But he quickly looked away, returning to their conversation about plans for the next day. Weeks turned into months. They had checked more than 20 orphanages and boarding schools, but there was no sign of Stacy. Rachel saw how with each failure, John was losing more and more hope. "We haven't even checked half of the list," the girl would say when she noticed the despair in his eyes. "She's out there waiting for you. I'm sure of it." They continued their search. Rachel passed her winter exams at the university, and despite John's offer to take a break from the search during her exams, she kept calling orphanages and following up on new leads. Spring arrived. The snow melted, revealing the first buds and blades of grass. On one such day, when Rachel was sitting in their makeshift headquarters, she received a call from a friend who worked in the child welfare department of a small town in the neighboring district. "Rachel, I think I have some information for you," the woman said. "We have a Stacy Smith, 12 years old, in our records. She entered a boarding school about a year ago after the death of her mother, who raised her alone." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "Any distinguishing features?" The medical record notes a mole behind her right ear and a scar on her knee. "And there's another strange thing. The girl categorically refuses to braid the right side of her hair, only the left. She says it's her secret sign for someone." Rachel barely suppressed an exclamation. These were exactly the distinguishing features John had mentioned. "And what do you know about the mother?" "Not much. Her name was Katherine Johnson. She died of cancer a year ago." They lived here for about 6 years, rather reclusively. Catherine worked as an accountant at a local firm. No information about the child's father. Do you have a photo of the girl or the mother? There's definitely a photo of the girl in the personal file. As for the mother, I'm not sure. I'll need to check the documents. Catherine quickly wrote down the information, trying to. Don't miss a single detail, Nancy. This is very important. Can we come by to check the documents and possibly meet the girl? Of course, Rachel. Anything for you. You know, I still remember how you helped me with the reports when you were interning. After the call, Rachel couldn't sit still. He was at work. John, we have a lead. She blurted out as soon as he picked up. There's a girl at the orphanage, Stacy Smith, with a mole behind her right ear, a scar on her knee, and a habit of braiding her hair only on the left. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? He finally asked hoarsely. A reliable person from the Child Welfare Department told me. The girl's mother died. Johnson, the age matches, the distinguishing features do too. I think it could be her. John, I'm leaving, John said briefly and hung up. Half an hour later, he was home. Rachel had never seen him so nervous. Usually calm and composed, now he couldn't sit still. What if it's not her? He said, pacing around the room. What if it's just a coincidence? I don't know if I can handle another disappointment. Rachel approached him and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. We won't jump to conclusions, we'll go and check. But so many coincidences at once. I feel like this can't just be a coincidence. They left the next morning. The journey to the shelter took almost 4 hours on poor roads. John was silent the whole way, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Rachel understood his state and didn't try to start a conversation. At the child welfare office, they were greeted by Nancy, a plump woman with kind eyes, an old acquaintance of Rachel's. Rachel, how much you've grown. She hugged the girl. You've turned into a real beauty. Then she turned to John Nicholson. Are you the girl's father? She asked directly. Possibly, John replied cautiously. We'd like to see the documents, if possible, and the girl herself. Nancy nodded and led them to her office. There, she took a folder with a personal file out of the safe. Here are all the documents for Stacy Johnson, including the birth certificate, medical record, and the mother's death certificate. John opened the folder with trembling hands. The first thing he saw was a photo of the girl, thin, with light braids and serious eyes. He looked at her, and his eyes filled with tears. It's her, he whispered. It's my Stacy. He flipped the page and saw a copy of the mother's passport. The photo was blurry, but even through the grainy copy, he recognized the features of the woman he had once loved. Catherine, his voice trembled. So, she really is gone. Nancy looked at him sympathetically. Cancer, she said quietly. She fought it for about a year, but by the time they found it, the disease was already in an advanced stage. The girl was left all alone. We don't know anything about any relatives. John covered his face with his hands. Rachel saw his fingers tremble. No matter what the relationship between him and Catherine had been, they had once loved each other, and now the realization that his ex-wife was gone forever had taken away the mystery of their separation. It was a heavy blow. Can we see Stacy? Rachel asked quietly. Yes, she's currently at the orphanage. It's not far from here, Nancy replied. But before you meet her, I need to warn you. The girl has been through a lot, she's very withdrawn, and she doesn't interact much with others. Be gentle with her. They drove to the orphanage. A gray two-story building, old and surrounded by a fence. Children were playing in the yard, but it was clear that the institution wasn't wealthy. Old swings and peeling paint on the walls. In the director's office, they had another conversation. A stern woman with a tight bun examined the documents John had provided. "Yes, we do have a Stacy Smith," she confirmed. "But you're claiming her real surname is Nicholson?" "Yes," John said firmly. "I'm her father. My ex-wife took her away 7 years ago and changed her last name. I've been searching for them all this time." The director pressed her lips together. "That's a serious claim, and to confirm it, we'll need a DNA test and a court decision. For now, I can allow you a short meeting with the girl in the presence of a psychologist." John nodded. "I understand. I'm willing to undergo any procedures. Just let me see my daughter." The director pressed a button on the intercom. "Linda, please bring Stacy to the visitation room." They walked into a small, bright room with a round table and several chairs. John nervously fidgeted with his cufflink. Rachel had never seen him so disoriented. "What do I say to her?" he whispered. "So many years have passed. She doesn't even know me." "Just be yourself," Rachel replied softly. "She's been waiting for you all this time. Remember the note under the floorboards?" At that moment, the door opened, and a thin girl in a school uniform entered. She had a single braid on the left side. The girl stopped at the door, warily looking at the unfamiliar adults. John slowly rose from his chair. His tear-filled eyes met the exact same eyes of the girl. "Stacy," he called softly. The girl froze, her gaze never leaving his. Something flickered across her face: recognition, disbelief, hope. "Dad?" she said uncertainly. "Is it true?" Time seemed to stop in that small room of the orphanage. John took a hesitant step toward his daughter, afraid to disturb that fragile moment of recognition. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me," his voice trembled. "I've been looking for you all these years." Stacy stood still, only tightening her grip on the strap of her school backpack. Her eyes were filled with a storm of emotions: disbelief, fear, hope. "Mom said you abandoned us," she said quietly. "Then, when she got sick, she said it wasn't true, that she took me away. I never stopped looking for you, Stacy, not for a single day," John replied. The girl took a small step forward, studying her father's face. "You have some gray hair now," she noticed. "And wrinkles around your eyes." 7 years have passed, John smiled weakly. "I've missed you so much." Suddenly, Stacy ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. He hugged her tightly, not hiding his tears. Rachel and the psychologist, who was present during the meeting, silently watched the scene, afraid to disturb the magic of the moment. When the first wave of emotions calmed down a little, they sat at the table. Stacy didn't let go of her father's hand, as if afraid he might disappear. "How did you find me?" she asked, shifting her gaze from her father to Rachel. "Thanks to the note you left under the floorboards in our old house," Rachel replied. "And thanks to Rachel, who helped me with the search." Stacy raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You found my note?" "Mom said that before we left, I hid a drawing with a message under the floorboard in the living room. She only told me about it before she died. She said that if you found the note, you would be able to find me. I only realized it recently," John added, "and I've been looking everywhere since then." The girl looked at Rachel, studying her with a child's straightforwardness. "Are you my new mom?" she asked unexpectedly. Rachel blushed. "No, I just helped your dad with the search," she answered softly. I grew up in an orphanage, and I know how the system works from the inside. Stacy nodded, accepting the explanation. Will you take me now? She asked quietly. I will, John replied. But there are some formalities we need to go through first, proving that I really am your father, getting permission from child services. But I promise I'll do it as quickly as I can. Is my room still there? Stacy asked after a pause. The one with the pink curtains and the canopy over the bed? John smiled. It's waiting for you, he nodded. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Mom was very sick before she died, she said softly. She kept apologizing, to me and to you. She said she made a big mistake when she took me away. That she wanted to punish you, but in the end she punished both herself and me. John lowered his head. We're both to blame for what happened. I was too caught up in work, didn't pay enough attention to the family. But it's going to be different now, he promised. Their time together was coming to an end. The orphanage director reminded them it was time to say goodbye. I'll come tomorrow, John promised his daughter, and I'll keep coming every day until we sort out all the paperwork. Stacy hugged him tightly before he left. I knew you'd find me, she whispered. I always believed you would. The following weeks turned into a bureaucratic marathon. John hired the best lawyers to speed up the process. A DNA test confirmed his paternity. All the necessary documents were collected, and child services completed their inspections. Rachel helped with everything, using her knowledge and connections. She knew which documents were needed first, who to talk to, and how to properly fill out the applications. Spending all his free time with his daughter, John brought her books, toys, and sweets. But the most precious thing for Stacy was those hours spent with her father, when she could tell him everything that had happened in her life over the years. Rachel often accompanied John on these visits. Gradually, Stacy grew accustomed to her and began to trust her. A special bond formed between the girl and her young stepmother. Having both grown up without parents, they learned to cherish every moment of family warmth. Rachel, do you know how to braid hair? Stacy asked one day. I'm not very good at it myself, Rachel replied, and the girls always laugh because I only ever have one braid. I do, Rachel smiled. Want me to show you different braiding styles? From that day on, they had their own little ritual. At each visit, Rachel would braid Stacy's hair into intricate styles. They talked about books, dreams, and everything in between. Finally, after a month, all the formalities were completed. John received official permission to bring his daughter home. That day, he arrived at the orphanage with a large bouquet of flowers for the director and gifts for the staff who had cared for Stacy. Thank you for everything you've done for my daughter, he said, shaking the director's hand. I know the conditions here aren't the best, but you did what you could. Stacy packed her few belongings into a small bag. Most of her clothes and toys had been left behind in the apartment she shared with her mother and were sold off by the landlords after Catherine's death. It's okay, John said, noticing how modest her luggage was. We'll get you everything you need. Before leaving, Stacy walked around the orphanage, saying goodbye to the caregivers and her friends. Many of the children looked at her with envy. Few of them could hope for their real father to come and take them to a real home. I'll come visit you, Stacy promised her best friend Mia, hugging her tightly. And I'll invite you over once we get settled. The ride home was filled with conversation. Stacy asked her father about his life, about the house, about how the city had changed over the years. Rachel sat in the back seat, letting father and daughter enjoy these hours of reunion. When they pulled up to the mansion, Stacy's eyes widened. This is our house, she asked in disbelief. It's so big. Yes, John replied. I always hoped that one day you'd come back, and I wanted you to have a real home, with a garden to run around in and a big room to play in. They stepped inside. Stacy looked around as if she'd entered a fairy tale. Spacious rooms, expensive furniture, everything was so different from the cramped apartment she had lived in with her mother. And even more so from the orphanage. "Come on, I'll show you your room," John said, taking her hand. They climbed up to the third floor, and John opened a white door. Stacy froze on the threshold. The room looked exactly like she remembered it: pink curtains, a canopy bed, books, and toys. Only now, everything seemed somehow smaller. Or maybe she had just grown over the years. "My old toys!" Stacy exclaimed, rushing to the shelf where a plush bear with a worn ear was sitting. "Mr. Beale." "I missed you so much," she whispered, clutching the toy to her chest as tears streamed down her cheeks. John hugged his daughter, feeling his own throat tighten with emotion. "Everything's going to be okay now," he whispered. "You're home." The first few days were not easy. Stacy had to get used to her new life, the large house, and the father she hadn't seen in 7 years. She often woke up in the middle of the night from nightmares, calling for her mom. John would come to her room, sit by her side, and hold her hand until she fell asleep again. Rachel often spent time at their home, helping Stacy adjust, reduce her anxiety, and learn to manage the emotional outbursts that naturally came after losing her mother and undergoing such a major life change. "She needs time," Rachel explained. "Be patient. Give her space to grieve, but also show her that life moves forward." John made radical changes to his lifestyle. He reduced his working hours and hired assistants so he could spend more time with his daughter. They went to the movies, to amusement parks, doing all the things Stacy had been deprived of in recent years. Little by little, their life began to stabilize. Stacy enrolled in a new school and quickly made friends. Her room gradually filled with new things: posters of current musicians, teenage novels, colorful trinkets. Her old toys moved to the top shelf, making room for more grown-up interests. By autumn, Stacy had begun to feel at home in both her new school and her father's house. The first months were tough. There were still tears at night, sudden mood swings, and silent days when she'd retreat to her room with a photo of her mother. But slowly, the wounds began to heal. John proved to be a patient father, willing to wait for his daughter to trust him again. Stacy successfully passed her state exams and graduated with honors as a teacher. On the day of her graduation, John and Stacy came to celebrate with a bouquet of white and pink peonies. "You're a real teacher now," Stacy said admiringly as she looked at the red diploma. "Yes, but I have other plans," Rachel replied as the three of them sat in a cozy cafe celebrating her graduation. She pulled a folder from her bag and laid it on the table in front of John. "I want to create a foundation to help separated families. We'll call it Find Me. We'll help parents who've lost their children and children who are searching for their parents," she said. John carefully looked through the documents. "It's a serious project. You'll need funding, an office, a team, legal support." "I know," Rachel nodded. "That's why I came to you. If you could help, at least in the beginning." "Rachel," John gently interrupted, "you found my daughter when everyone else had given up. I'll fund your project completely, no conditions, no ifs. Rachel's eyes lit up. "Really? But that's a lot of money." "It's money that will help other families experience the same happiness we did with Stacy," John finished. "I won't just give you the funds, I'll become a trustee of the foundation. Together, we'll make it the best in the country." And so their joint project began. John rented a small office in the city center and helped take care of all the legal paperwork. Rachel developed search methodologies and reached out to friends in orphanages and child services. Soon, the Find Me Foundation brought on lawyers, psychologists, and former orphans who knew the system from the inside. Despite her young age, Stacy wanted to be involved too. After school, she'd come to the office to help sort flyers, input data into the computer, or simply share her story with people who had lost hope. Working side by side, Rachel and John got to know each other more deeply. She no longer saw him as just a successful businessman, but as a caring father, a loyal friend, and a man with a profound emotional core. He admired her kindness, intelligence, energy, and devotion to the cause. The foundation's first major success came 6 months after opening. They helped a woman find her son, who had been taken to another city and hidden for 5 years by her ex-husband. When the mother and child were finally reunited in the foundation's office, no one could hold back tears. The story made it into the local newspapers, and people started talking about Find Me. "You see? We're making a difference," John said one evening, as he and Rachel stayed late sorting through new applications. "Yes, because of you," Rachel corrected him. "Maybe we should switch to using first names?" John smiled, then suddenly offered, "We've been through so much together, and you're still calling me like I'm your boss." Rachel blushed slightly. "It's a habit." "Well, I'll start using your first name." She didn't notice the flicker in John's eyes, something warmer than just friendship. Months passed, and the foundation continued to grow. They moved into a larger office. Successful family reunifications became more frequent, and Find Me gained recognition not just in their city, but across the country. People from different regions reached out to them, and they did everything they could to help every single one. Stacy, meanwhile, was transforming from an awkward girl into a confident young woman. At home, she often teased her father and Rachel, calling them workaholics who couldn't see past their paperwork. "Why don't you two go out somewhere together?" she suggested one evening during dinner. "To the theater or a restaurant, go have some fun." John choked on his tea, and Rachel suddenly found the tablecloth very interesting. "We have too much work," she mumbled. "You always have excuses," Stacy huffed. "Fine, then I'm going to Mia's for a sleepover. She downloaded a new series, we'll binge watch it all night." After she left, an awkward silence settled over the house. "She's right, you know," John finally said. "We really do work too much. Maybe we should go out somewhere?" "As colleagues?" Rachel asked cautiously. "As friends," John replied, though something in his eyes suggested he didn't want to stop at friendship. Their outing took place at the local theater. Both felt awkward, like teenagers on a first date. But gradually the tension faded, giving way to the familiar ease of their conversations. 3 years had passed since the foundation was established. Rachel had grown from an inexperienced manager into a confident director of a nationally recognized organization. In the foundation's daily life, John had become the main sponsor and advisor. Their relationship was quietly evolving. Business dinners began to resemble dates. Subtle gestures of affection appeared. John noticed Rachel's love for wildflowers, and from then on, a modest bouquet of cornflowers or daisies decorated her desk each week. Rachel remembered his fondness for ginger cookies and always brought some to the office. Stacy observed these changes with approval. "When are you two going to stop pretending you're just friends?" she asked her father. "Everyone can see you're in love with each other." "Stacy, it's complicated," John sighed. "Rachel's young. She has her whole life ahead of her. And I'm 15 years older, with a kid and a bunch of responsibilities." "Yeah, and she loves both of us," Stacy rolled her eyes. "You and me." She's practically family already. For the 5th anniversary of the Find Me Foundation, a grand celebration was held. By that time, they had helped reunite more than 300 families. Dozens of people they had assisted came to the event, along with government officials and sponsors. Rachel, wearing an elegant blue dress, took the stage to give a speech about the importance of never losing hope. "Every child deserves a family," she said. "Everyone has the right to find their loved ones. Our foundation will continue its work for as long as it is needed." John watched her from the audience, admiration glowing in his eyes. Later that evening, as they were driving home, he suddenly suggested, "Let's take a walk along the embankment. It's such a warm night." They strolled along the river, talking about the celebration, about the foundation's future, and about Stacy, who was preparing to enter university. John stopped and turned to Rachel. "You know, I've been meaning to say this for a while," he hesitated. "You've become an inseparable part of our lives, mine and Stacy's, and I can't imagine the future without you." Rachel held her breath. "What are you trying to say?" "That I love you," John said simply. "And if you feel the same." He didn't get to finish. Rachel stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have for a long time." Their relationship blossomed into a deep love that was welcomed by everyone, especially Stacy. She had long considered Rachel her second mom and was thrilled that her father had finally admitted his feelings. "Just don't take 10 years to plan the wedding like you did to confess," she joked. Rachel moved into their house, which now truly felt alive. The once cold and lifeless mansion had become a real home. Stacy decided to celebrate her 17th birthday in a special way. John hosted a garden party, inviting Stacy's friends and the family's close circle. Stacy, more grown up and radiant than ever, was the center of attention, graciously accepting congratulations and gifts. After the cake and candles, John unexpectedly asked for silence. He took Rachel's hand and led her into the center of the crowd. "5 years ago, a random discovery changed our lives," he began, speaking to the guests. "A little note hidden beneath the floor helped me find my daughter, and my daughter helped me find love." He turned to Rachel. "You brought light back into our home. You became our family, and today, on Stacy's birthday, I want to ask you." He dropped to one knee and pulled a velvet box from his pocket. "Rachel, will you marry me?" In the silence that followed, the only sounds were the guests' gasps of delight and Stacy's quiet sob, as she made no attempt to hide her tears of joy. Rachel, who had dreamed all her life of a real family, looked at the man before her, at the ring with its shining stone, and at Stacy, who already saw her as a mother. "Yes," she said simply. "Of course, yes." John slipped the ring onto her finger, and Stacy rushed to hug them both. Finally, she laughed through tears. "Now we're really a family." The wedding took place 2 months later. It was modest but beautiful, held in the same garden where the proposal had happened. Stacy was the maid of honor, glowing with happiness just as much as the bride and groom. One of the most touching moments of the ceremony came when Stacy's childhood drawing, the one found beneath the floorboards, was displayed in a lovely frame made of Karelian birch. "This note brought our lives together," John said. "Let it always remind us that hope never dies, and that sometimes you just have to give fate a little nudge." The drawing took a place of honor in their home, hanging in the living room where every guest could see it. It became a symbol of their extraordinary story, how a forgotten note led to the reunion of a father and daughter, the creation of a foundation helping other families, and the finding of love and happiness Rachel had always dreamed of. The Find Me Foundation continued its work. Each new story of a reunited family served as a reminder to those who had lost hope that miracles do happen, that broken threads of fate can be woven together again, if you don't give up and believe in something better. And the little note under the floorboards, once written by a 5-year-old girl who missed her father, remained a lasting testament to the power of love to overcome any obstacle. Stacy looked at the framed drawing and smirked. "You know," she said, "I always knew Rachel would become our mom." "How are you so sure?" John asked, surprised. "I just knew," Stacy smiled. "Some things are meant to happen. You just have to give fate a little help." It was hard to argue with that.